stuff. All right. I'd like to invite, well, it doesn't look like we have the chief. Doesn't look like we have the list I had of people who are going to be here.
Yeah,
So.
Game day change.
Super. Well, thank you all for coming. The first proclamation of the evening is for Peace Officers Memorial Day. So whereas the police officers of America have worked devotedly and selflessly on behalf of the people of this nation, regardless of the peril or hazard to themselves, and whereas these officers have safeguarded the lives and property of their fellow Americans, and whereas by the enforcement of our laws, these same officers have given our country internal freedom from fear of the violence and civil disorder that is presently affecting other nations, and whereas these men and women, by their patriotic service and their dedicated efforts, have earned the gratitude of the Republic, and whereas the service and sacrifice of Ames Police Sergeant Howard Snyder is eternally honored at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and the Iowa Peace Officer Memorial, therefore, I, Chris Nelson, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Ames, do hereby proclaim May 15th, 2019 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of the federal, state, and municipal officers who have been killed or disabled in the line of duty. This is done in recognition of the service given by the men and women who night and day stand guard in our midst to protect us through enforcement of our laws. Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Our second proclamation of the evening is for National Public Works Week. We'll bring John Joyner and Tracy Warner forward. So, whereas public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are of vital importance to sustainable communities and to the health, safety, and well-being of the people of Ames, and whereas such facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees from state and local units of government and the private sector, who are responsible for and must plan, design, build, operate, and maintain the transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to serve our citizens. And whereas it is in the public's interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the United States of America to gain knowledge and to maintain a progressive interest and understand the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2019 marks the 59th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Therefore, I, Chris Nelson, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Ames, do hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through the 25th, 2019 as National Public Works Week. I urge all our people to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities and ceremonies designed to acknowledge our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they have made to our national health, safety, welfare, and quality of life. I do want to first mention that the mayor is in Washington, D.C. on the chamber trip to meet with our congressional delegation, so I'll be serving as Mayor Pro Tem this evening. Next item on the agenda is consent. Are there any items that anyone would like pulled?
I would move that we pull item 12.
Second.
All those in favor of pulling item 12 from the consent agenda?
Aye.
Okay, we pulled item 12. Are there any others?
I'd move to pull item 19.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pull item 19. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, item 19 is pulled from the consent agenda. If there are no others, I take a motion to approve consent.
Move consent.
Minus 12 and 19.
Minus 12 and 19.
Second.
That's a roll call vote.
Betcher,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Meeting Hanson,
Aye.
Corey Aaron.
Aye.
All right. Item number 12.
So item number 12 is our appointment of a new ex officio. And so I guess I would turn that over to Ally.
Sure. So I just want to start off by saying that it's truly been an honor and a privilege to work with you guys. And I'll never forget my first meeting here. It went past 11 o'clock. And I remember everyone coming up to me afterwards and be like, you volunteered for this? Like, you want to do this? And I'm really glad because, you know, throughout all the long meetings and all of that, I've learned so much. And I think this is one of the most valuable experiences I'll ever have. And it's just been amazing working with all of you. I really respect and admire everyone that I've met, all of you up on the dais, all of the staff. You work so hard and so consistently for everyone, and I hope to emulate that someday. And I'm really, really sad to be leaving, but I know that Devin is going to be amazing at this position, and I hope that he comes to enjoy this job as much as I have over the last year. So, yeah, thank you so much for working with me, and it's really been a privilege, guys.
What if we don't vote to let you go?
Well, I have respect for the law.
No? Okay.
So what are your plans?
So I'm so excited. In only a couple short days, I'm going to be flying to Amman, Jordan, to continue my Arabic education. And hopefully, I only have 1 year left of undergrad, which is also very sad. Hopefully, I'll be going to graduate school after that for Middle Eastern studies. So I'll be there the whole summer, and I'll be fine. I'll be safe. I know everyone's like, oh no, but I'll be fine. It'll be a really great experience. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service the last year.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you. Okay.
And I think we have Devin here too, who maybe could introduce himself to us.
Hello, everybody. I'm Devin. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a rising junior, I should say, in political science and public relations. I'm really excited to work with you all. I know many of you as in the capacity as a reporter for the Daily. And in that time, I got to know many of you better than obviously if I had no experience. So I hope that will give me a leg up in this. I also really look forward to talking to students and with you all about potential policy solutions and how we can make Ames a better place for students as well as just people in general. So I'm really looking forward to that. And if you have any other questions, I'd be more than willing to answer.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
So I would move approval.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Well, Ally, as a small token of our appreciation, you get to keep your nameplate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ally.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll see you starting.
And Devin, you can go ahead and come up and take your seat. All right, next item, item 19.
Item 19, the reason I pulled this, well, first, some context. Item 19 is a request from Ames Main Street for summer sidewalk sales. And we're kind of in an interesting position here. Let me just remind you of some of the history. Back in January, during a single meeting, we had a request to do something similar, to waive parking fees for an event. And that was in the amount of $5,300. At the same meeting, we also reduced the parking meter rates by half. And so both of those have a hit on the parking fund. And I think we understand that the parking fund is something that we're going to have to figure out how to fund in a long-term way going forward. And so I have no issue at all with the temporary obstruction permit part of this request. That's, I think, just using the sidewalks to display wares. But when it comes to the parking issue, if we go a little further into our history, or maybe it's more recent, on February 26th, we had a very similar request. It was from Ames Pride Fest to what we're being asked to do tonight. And at that time, they were asked, or we were asked to waive $1,379 for an event on a Saturday, like this one is. And council voted no on that. And so the way I look at it, we started voting no to requests to waive parking fees on that date. And I think we should keep saying no until we figure out what our policy is going to be about how we evaluate these requests. I don't think we have a policy right now. And I think if we're to vote yes on this request tonight, it ends up being kind of incoherent behavior from the council. So I'm asking that we consider alternative 2 in the packet, which is to approve the request for the sidewalk sales, but just not the request to waive the parking meter revenue. Instead, we would ask the applicant to reimburse the amount of the parking meter waiver. And so again, the way I look at this, we have these 2 events. They basically asked for the same thing. A Saturday event, they asked for waiver of parking meter fees not because they were obstructing those parking spaces, but because they wanted the event to be more attractive to participants. So as a matter of consistency, I think we should proceed with alternative 2, and that's my motion, that we proceed on alternative 2.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So at the time of the Pride Fest request, as I recall, we deadlocked 3-3, which meant that the motion to approve the waiver failed. And the discussion at the time had to do with the fact that we routinely approve things for Ames Main Street as a whole downtown event, and that maybe one of the concerns would be that if we approve this request from Pride Fest, then we would have to be approving requests from every organization who was not Main Street, who was coming to ask for parking waivers. Is that an accurate
That's my
recollection? Okay. So I was one of the people who supported the request from Pride Fest, but I've also been a big supporter of Main Street. And as I recall, and maybe Brian can help me with this, we have a certain fiscal responsibility to support Main Street that we contract for, but then we also provide these additional perks, if you want to call them that. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong person. I'm trying to remember what the original agreements were with Main Street when they got into the Main Street business.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Main Street had to show that they had support from the city for 3 years worth for 3 years. And so the city council, through the outside funding request process, provided funding. And that's been the mechanism that the council has provided funding on an ongoing basis. I think the parking contribution is a separate issue. I don't think that that's a requirement, as far as I know, for continuing as a Main Street Iowa community.
No, and
Right.
it hasn't been part of our contract, right? That's
Correct.
That's been a separate
Correct.
request. Okay, so the original commitment was 3 years, and then since then, we've done the contracting.
Correct.
Okay,
Annually.
Right, on an annual basis.
Right.
Yeah.
so I don't disagree that we need to examine this policy, because I do think we're being somewhat inconsistent, but I'm not sure that this is the time to deny the request for parking. And I don't know that we can develop a policy before July 25th. So I'm I'm feeling in a tough position here, but I don't think I can support the motion.
Well, I think if there's going to be a time to push pause on this, I think this is a time when we have to think carefully about whether to proceed by saying yes, because what we have are two events asking for this exact same dollar amount on Saturdays for the same purpose, to attract people to downtown generally for a downtown-oriented event. And we said yes to one of them, and we've said no to the other. And I just don't think that looks very good.
So, David, did you make any effort to reach out to Ames Main Street to let them know we were going to be pulling this item so they could be present and participate in a meaningful way?
No, I did not.
So this feels like a bit of a surprise that we're pulling this so that the organizers have no notice to be here and to respond as to what the impacts of this denial would be. I mean, in general, if we want to have a substantive conversation, we should let the parties who are impacted know about this. So I'm not exactly sure what to do with this. Is timing wise, Brian, if we kick the can down the road to the next meeting and put this on an agenda and give them an opportunity to show up, would there still be time in order for them to get their plans made?
Well, I wonder Tashik might be in a better place to answer that question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Dvorsky. I'm the events coordinator for Ames Main Street.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too.
So, Chris, is it possible we could just ask her a question about the impacts of this?
Sure.
So, could you please give us a sense of what the impacts would be if we did not grant the approval for the parking waiver?
Definitely. So we requested this parking waiver just as a way to attract more people to downtown Ames, to get people into the different stores that are down here. So we do believe that not having that parking may impact the number of sales that businesses in downtown Ames may do that day, excuse me. The sales themselves go from Thursday through Saturday. We are only requesting a waiver for parking for that Saturday.
And procedurally, how would this work? So who would be reimbursing the city for the lost parking meter? So if we said you don't have to feed the meters, who's actually going to be paying to reimburse the city?
That is, if I could clarify,
Yeah.
I had proposed alternative 2, which is to
Right.
approve, but then require someone to pay for it.
So are you asking me who I would?
Yeah.
So if we went with alternative 2, who actually would be writing the check for, how much is it? About $13.79.
That's a good question. I guess since it was just proposed, I haven't had an opportunity to crunch those numbers. If you don't mind, I guess we'd have to revisit that.
But is there an organization that would be logically tapped to pay that?
I guess logically, Ames Main Street it would be the organization that's hosting the event.
And they have resources to cover that? I'm just asking, I don't know. Do they have?
I'll be frank. No.
That's what I was assuming.
Yes. The answer would be no.
Okay.
But Tara, in the future, if we were to set a policy that we were going to be reviewing these in a different way, would Main Street have the capability in the future to work out some sort of strategy for fundraising to cover parking or sponsorship to cover parking?
Yeah, I definitely think so. We would just need more notice and enough time to do some strategic planning with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like and I seconded this motion, not because I have anything against the event itself, but because it does seem like for a similar event with a similar goal, so the one David mentioned where we declined their request to waive parking, that goal too would have been to attract more people to the downtown area on that day. So really, the goals are the same, and I would like to systematize this sort of understanding that we have that Main Street is allowed waivers and no one else is, or if that's really what we want to do. So
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
think part of the discussion we had with Pride Fest as well, we ended up approving closure for, I think, I don't know, 80 or so meters around the event area, just not the entire downtown that they had requested. And so, and I think one of the concerns you had expressed was that the meters were already closed for the farmer's market that morning, which they would be in this
In this
case
case,
as
too.
well.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I think looking at a policy is warranted, but I do think there's a little more to it than just apples to apples.
Okay, anything else from council?
Yeah, I mean, I want to point out that although we didn't give notice that we would be discussing this tonight, it's on the agenda and there are multiple alternatives offered. And I don't think that we should go under the assumption that people are going to, get exactly, the first option on the agenda. So
But if we're
I think
gonna-
it's a fair conversation.
If we're going to have a substantive conversation where there may be some people that would want to be notified, we've had this agenda since Friday. We could let people know, let the council know that we're going to pull an agenda item to have a substantive conversation about it.
Well, that's fair. And I don't think that this is something we have to resolve tonight exactly, but I don't think the issue changes much. We could put it off.
Okay, so you plan on bringing something up in council comments later to talk about it further from a policy perspective?
Yeah, we certainly could do that.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second for alternative 2. All those in favor of alternative 2, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
No.
Nay. Appears to be motion fails. Is there any other motions on the table?
I'd move alternative 1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of alternative 1?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same, or nay? Sorry, that was me saying nay, not voting nay. Motion carries.
Chris, I think this needs to be a resolution roll call though, doesn't it?
Oh, you are correct. Well, let's see. Is it
Money.
16,
Money.
it is money, so it is a roll call vote, sorry.
So we have to go back to the first motion?
Well, we can just start with the second motion. That might speed things up.
Can we do that?
We probably want to go back and fix it from the beginning.
I withdraw the first motion. Does someone want to make a different motion?
Okay, well,
Alternate.
going back, the first motion was withdrawn, so,
I will move alternative 1.
Second.
all right, roll call vote.
Morton,
Nay.
Garten,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Hanson,
Nay.
Poirier,
Aye.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Motion carries. That's the last consent item, so we'll move on to public forum. This is a time set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. I will stay along the lines of the mayor, limiting each speaker to 3 minutes. We have Richard Deo.
I would like to address my comments during council comments.
We probably still have the same stance that we always. That's not possible, so. Any other speakers for public forum? We'll close public forum and we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. Item number 46 is a presentation by Jim Thompson, who the council has invited to present on strategies for maintaining downtown buildings. Jim is from Main Street, Iowa. So welcome, Jim. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council and staff. Pleasure to be here. I guess just a little background on me. I'm a downtown economic development specialist for the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Been doing this forever. That's why I have so much gray hair. I work with all 942 towns in Iowa. And so I have worked with the largest and the smallest towns. What I was asked was to talk about what I see in my travels of what other towns are doing progressively to get buildings improved. But what I want to start with real quick is what makes a really good district downtown. When we do our job correctly, we improve the assessed value of every building in your downtown, and we create parking problems. That's our job. And so it kind of relates a little bit to your earlier discussion, and frankly, glad I was here to witness that. I spent 10 years as a city council person in Northern Iowa and really appreciate the effort that all the elected officials provide to this community. And it's been a few years since I've been here, and I'm thrilled to be back, frankly. But I wish, as a council, I just have one really quick request. Just remembering things like what Whiskey River looked like before the improvements and what it looks like today. I think it's really, really easy for us in downtown development to forget how far we've come. This is, and I've been on record of saying this before, your Ames downtown is one of the best downtowns in the state of Iowa. And frankly, I'm ready for this community to get serious about a Great American Main Street Award nomination. You deserve that recognition, and you've come a long ways. Now, I'm not saying you don't have more to do, and that's probably why I was invited here tonight, okay? Because what else could we be doing? So I put together just a really quick, down and dirty synopsis of what I'm seeing. And it starts with, at the top of the list, tax increment financing. Now, I am not naive. I've been doing this a long time. There have been abuses to TIF that I've witnessed across the state of Iowa, and the appropriate use of TIF is critical for getting what we want as a community. But as a former elected official, when we invest in brick and mortar, we almost always win. Helps the school district, the county, and the city. Every time. But what gets in the way of those discussions generally are personalities. We get worried about, is somebody, a current property owner, going to make an extra buck on it? Instead of worrying about, are we investing in our community and getting that return on investment longer term than shorter term. And so the appropriate use of TIF is really critical to that. Now, the second item that I want to really touch on, it's the one that I believe is the game changer. And so TIF is urban revitalization. It's chapter 403. Urban renewal, I'm sorry. The legislature couldn't have made this any more confusing, okay? Urban renewal is chapter 403. Urban revitalization is chapter 404. What chapter 404 provides you is the ability to do consolidated abatement on items like rentable units in upper stories downtown. And you can do that for up to 10 years and up to 100%. I personally don't recommend any community that I work with do 10 years and 100%, but it depends on the circumstances and what the need is of that district. We have districts across the state that have housing issues like I've never seen in my career. And I've been here and chatted about housing before. You have some of the most unusual statistics, even of college towns, that I've seen across the country. You know, your rentable units in town are exceeding, and your owner occupied are at such a lower percentage that I worry, can people find the appropriate housing as they're leaving the university or getting into the job force? So, upper story development is really critical to some of that discussion, especially when you can provide those incentives to them on a consolidated abatement schedule. So TIF can be used with upfront dollars, and some developers need that. So urban revitalization, the consolidated abatement, comes at the end of a project on a year-to-year basis when you're forgiven those taxes. So the net effect is virtually the same. Whether you do an annual rebate, when you use TIF, it's minus the debt service. When you use consolidated abatement and you choose to do 100%, it's 100%. So it's really a tool that I think cannot be overlooked today if you decide that you have properties that deserve to be fully occupied. And I know you're getting a lot closer to that today than you have in the past, but that's a tool that I think is really important. The other piece about housing that I really want to stress, and I have not seen it as much in Ames as I have in some other communities, is with the legislature several years ago now, created a split classification of downtown properties where you could have different owners of different levels. And owner-occupied upper story housing is a market that is critical to the success of any downtown. You need feet on the street, okay? And if you can get return on investment from every piece of square footage, it certainly helps on that return on investment. So as we allow rentable units, quality rentable market rate units, and I'm not suggesting that you don't need to have all affordable housing options available in town also, but also the market rate, the owner occupied pieces. I'm seeing it now in towns that are not performing at the level of your downtown. And they're really reaping those benefits of owner-occupied units. Now, my wife and I are empty nesters, and we choose to live in a townhouse now because we don't want to mow the lawn and scoop the snow. Those things are also available to upper story residents when it's owner-occupied. When it's owner-occupied, though, I'm seeing in my travels the highest of finishes, the granite countertops, the rooftop patios, the secured parking, the elevators, which aren't required, okay? But they're putting in the amenities that make it necessary. And so when I say that we're reaping the benefits of those new assessed values in those communities, we are. We're raising the value of those buildings. And I think it's critical that that piece of housing, it will never solve your issue, but it needs to be part of your solution, okay? The last things that I want to talk about that are easy, I'm a grant administrator for Community Catalyst Building Remediation Program. What it is a city-sponsored grant that assists generally private building owners. It's a $100,000 grant. The city must have skin in the game. It can be abatement, it can be TIF, it can be in kind. And then we score those competitively across all the applications that we receive. We've done this 2 fiscal years, and we generally get about 70 to 80 applications from across Iowa. I will tell you that for your population, you have an uphill battle. Because what we're really, 40% is dedicated to communities by legislature for communities less than 1,500 in population. The thought behind that is if they remediate that building in that small town, that it's catalytic and can serve as an example, not just for other buildings in that community, but across the state. So for Ames to be competitive, the city would have to step up in a very healthy way, and I'm willing to work with you on what we think that might look like. I administer the program, I don't score the program. The largest communities, and there's only 2 that have ever received this grant, are Mason City and Clinton. So you would be in that higher echelon of population. But I don't want you to forget about it, okay? The other one that you have been successful with in the last several years is a Main Street Challenge Grant. We have 52 current Main Street communities, and you have a much better chance when you think about the competitiveness of this. 52 compared to 942 are eligible for Catalyst, okay? And you guys have participated in a nice way in the past. Challenge grants are dedicated for only participating Main Street communities. It must be a dollar for dollar match. That application will be out soon after the fiscal year, soon after July 1. They're $75,000. And generally what it takes is a partnership between the city and the property owner to come up with matching dollars. But it's very competitive. You guys have had success in the past. It's something that should be considered. I want to leave you with just a couple things. So we do historic preservation, but it's economic development through historic preservation. So we're trying to improve those values of all those buildings. And one of the ways to do it is through historic tax credits. It's a very competitive process. If you're going to consider an application today, the process has changed. And if it's not very close to being shovel ready, it's not going to be approved the first year it's applied for. We have one that I worked with this morning that's coming back for the 4th time. And they're hopeful that they've done enough due diligence to meet that curve of shovel ready. So I don't want to build your confidence up, but it's important that they're ready to roll when they come in, okay? Last thing I want to talk about is through the IRS, and it's an ADA credit when you file your income taxes. So when you do Americans with Disability Act improvements on a building, you can get a credit for those. So if you spend $10,250 in a calendar year, you can get a $5,000 credit. It's Form 8826. I am not a tax preparer, CPA, or attorney, but we refer to those professionals that do that. But please ask them. Many of them don't even know this exists. It's little known, and we're telling the world that why wouldn't you take credit for this? So what does this mean? If you're doing handicap accessible restrooms and you do a men's and a women's, please always do the women's first. But if you did it in October and you improved the men's in March, you can apply 2 years in a row for the exact same credit, given that you spend $10,250. Now, if you've done any grab bars, ramps, or wide doors improvements for a restroom, commercial restrooms, it's not hard to spend that money. If you spend less than that, if you spend $5,250, you get a $2,500 credit. So you get 50% after you meet that threshold of $250. Most every commercial building owner is doing these kinds of improvements and not taking the credits. So that's why we're trying to tell the world this is something that needs to be done. It's available. We need to take advantage of it. When I was asked to come, I said I would come and offer a conversation. That's really, I'm offering my assistance to Ames Main Street and the city to try to come up with what do you want to be? Are there other buildings that need to be improved? What kind of tools need to be used that are right for your downtown? I'm not suggesting that you should ever do what I tell you. I'm suggesting that let's work together and try to figure out how can we get other buildings improved, increase their values, and then all of us reap the benefits of that. Is that cool? I'll answer any questions you have, but we truly just want to help. That's what we're here for.
Jim, what was the ADA tax form number?
8826. It's an IRS form 8826. please just do a search and look. I'll even email it to you, Gloria, if you want to. I mean, it's a simple thing to do, and I'm shocked how underutilized it is.
Jim, do you know of anybody who's using workforce housing tax credits for the downtowns?
That's really a loaded question. Yes, but not so much right now. Of course, there was a moratorium put on last fiscal year. It's with the flood relief and some of the other remnants of that, that's going to be a challenge right now. It's a great tool. Probably going to be a little while before it's as effective as it could be. But you talk about other tools. What some towns are doing, I put on here community development block grant with the understanding that I know you're an entitlement community. But what we did at the state, we amended our 5-year plan, and we've been here several times and had this discussion with city staff about you could do facade master plans and downtown revitalization programs, but just understand it's a pie. If you take money to do those things, it takes it away from something else. That was what we decided to do at the state because we thought it was that important, but it is 100% your decision. The other one that in some communities can get controversial, some communities are using hotel motel tax or local option sales tax for downtown improvements. I have to tell you, I'm happy to work with you on those. I would rather see you do urban revitalization or urban renewal, truly, because it's bound to brick and mortar improvements in those structures. And if they raise the value, we can abate those or rebate those. I like that process better than a grant, frankly. But I work for you. I'll do what you want on that. So we can have that discussion too. But generally speaking, tourism dollars especially are really hard to come by. And so why would we dilute those? So, but again, I'll follow your lead.
So if you were to make a recommendation or some suggestion maybe of next steps for us, what organization should be involved with this?
I think we start with Main Street and the Economic Vitality Committee partnered with the Design Committee. On our team at the state, we have 2 design professionals and 2 business professionals that could come here and just work through a process to really say what's the best step forward. The other thing that I would add, and this is weird, placemaking is kind of the new buzzword of the day. Truly, we've been doing placemaking in downtowns and Main Street for 40 years. So programming space creates people to visit. So having sidewalk sales brings people to town that might not always be there. And you have a contract to work with your Main Street organization to manage those kinds of things. So having a discussion about what that contract and other services that should be done, I think is really important. This is a normal function of mature Main Street programs. They ask us to come in and give an outside view of what are some other things that could be done. When I was at the local level, that's what happened. They said, what are some other things that you could do to help the city? And we're willing, through that contract, compensate you in an admin for some of the things that we're trying to struggle through now. And maybe it's better for you to do it because you're there, boots on the ground every day. And so that's a discussion that could happen also. But we want you to finish the last buildings that need to be done. And if there are areas that need to be improved, what do we do together to try to make it happen? Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jim, for coming. Anybody, any other questions from council? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We look forward to next steps. Move on to item number 47, request for cornbread sign on the former depot building. I believe we have a report from Kelly.
Good evening, City Council. Tonight, you've had a referral to staff to look at, a referral from the property owner of the Depot building downtown to consider approval of a sign request to change out an existing sign that's placed on the roof to a new sign. As you mentioned, it's for new restaurant space that's going in named Cornbread. We currently have a development agreement with this property that has a statement that I've quoted for you in the staff report about ensuring that changes to the building are compatible with the historic qualities of the building. This is a remnant piece of requirement from when the city first transferred this property over to Hubble for development of the site. When this was a city-owned building and parking lot, it was important to us to maintain the depot as part of the project and to maintain the historic qualities of that. So the plan originally did have drawings that talked about how the site would be developed, and changes to the depot were minimal. There's some language about controlling the views to the depot as well. When we restated the development agreement about a year ago, the plans and drawings were removed from that. Provisions were included about what needed to be maintained on the property. So this statement that's been in the agreement for over 25 years was kept. It's been brought to you a few times for decisions. In the fall, we looked at a number of small changes to the exterior of the building to allow for Cornbread to go ahead with outdoor seating and some other changes to the rear of the building, but nothing was proposed on the front at that time. When the sign permit came in, I looked at this, and in the context of the past decisions about how the project was originally conceived and built out, I said that we would recommend denial of the sign permit as staff to enlarge the sign on the roof of the depot. My take on that was that the roof is clearly a character-defining feature of the depot. It's a symbolic piece of the architecture. It's not an original roof in terms of the material that's on the roof, but the form of the roof is original from when the depot was first constructed. So my decision was to say that the enlarged sign that was higher on the roof was not compatible with the roof design that is part of the depot. And with that, the applicant has requested for you to review that decision and give direction about whether the city council finds the proposal to be consistent with the development agreement. And this is the attachment that's in the staff report, trying to give you context to what is proposed. So the bottom sign is, it's really hard to read up there, but the bottom sign is trying to take the logo of Cornbread and fit it on the existing sign panel. The one at the top is showing you what is proposed in terms of both the lettering style, the size, and location that's proposed.
But we were sent a corrected rendering, right, on this? Did you get that?
By email.
I don't know if you saw it.
I do not have anything other than this.
Oh, okay. You want to put it on there?
Corrected. Yeah, if I could pull this over, this is, I think we have some perspective issues on this photography, and we received another photo by email that maybe is worth taking a look at too.
Okay. Might work. So, yeah, I'm not sure. So that probably is. So that would still be, if you were to try to key in on elements that are correlated to both drawings, if you see that cementous cap in this area below the two windows, that's kind of a constant, creating a horizontal line for you to kind of look at for proportions here. The current sign panel doesn't really go above that. So you can see the lettering is larger and still above that kind of marker as a horizontal line. It's clearly set as low as it can go on the slope of the roof, but that's just to help give you context of what it is versus what's out there today. So again, what you're asked to do tonight is to make a motion of whether to accept the proposal is consistent with the agreement or not.
All right.
Council?
I'll start. I mean, I appreciate this staff's work on this, and I understand, I think, where their interpretation is coming from. But when I just when I look at this sign, it seems to me like it still does keep a lot of the features of the depot intact. I like how you can see the roof through it, as opposed to the other sign panel, which is just the solid, and it kind of blocks more of the shingles even than what we have here. So again, I mean, I understand staff looking at what's there and trying to come up with a interpretation of that. But in this case, I would be supportive of accepting this proposal.
Is that a
I would
motion?
move that we accept this sign proposal.
We have a second.
Do we need
Do you need more?
input from,
Well, we do have the owner here. Would you like to provide any sort of input?
I'll withdraw my motion for now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Newstrom. I'm here with my wife, Dr. Sonia Stolte Newstrom, and I am Mr. Cornbread. She is Mrs. Cornbread. We live at 829 Douglas Avenue here in Ames, also an historic building. What we are trying to do with this entire restaurant, sort of a big picture perspective. I appreciate all the comments that have been made so far, and as well as the comments and work from city staff on this proposal. A big picture perspective of what we're trying to do, because downtown Ames is our home, it's our community, it's where my wife's business is, it's where my business will be, it's where we live, it's where we raise our children. We're trying to create something of value to this area and this community. And I believe that what we're doing, especially with this structure, is creating something that's very special. Something that will stand the test of time, just as this beautiful historic structure has, and be an asset for downtown Ames as well as greater Ames for years to come. We are thinking big picture here, long term. From my perspective, this sign does not vary from those goals in any way. As stated already, we are proposing to remove the metal backer board that was part of the structure when the original redevelopment of this property came through and the signage was placed upon that building. We do note in our letter to you that I drafted to you that sign structure, either the mounting panel as well as the mounting brackets, are not original to the building. We're proposing to remove that and replace it with individual letters that are all transparent, which provides actual better views to the roof structure. Additionally, from our perspective, the scale and size of the sign is consistent with the mass and scale of the building itself. We do note that the width of the sign itself is consistent with the width between each of the three window sections. It's exactly the same width. That was done on purpose. A lot of effort and time was taken to carefully craft this sign to not only use our more contemporary font of our logo, which is valuable to us, but also be sensitive to the historic properties of the structure. The materials, white aluminum, match the framing of the windows on the building. The illumination of the sign is actually neon letters, an historic sign illuminating piece of equipment that will actually mount on top in front of each letter, and so it'll pop out and be three-dimensional. From our perspective, this is an elegant, classy sign, fun logo. We use those words a lot in our branding with our team. We're doing our team training right now. Things are getting very exciting. You just approved our liquor license on your consent agenda. Thank you very much. And with that, thank you very much for your time and listening to me. And regardless of what happens today, I welcome you all to come early and often to our wonderful establishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Now do we have?
No, sure. I would move that we approve the request for the cornbread barbecue sign at the Depot building.
second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Before we vote, I will be abstaining due to a potential conflict of interest. This is a voice vote, so all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
If I could just add, I was, initially, I didn't want to take this on. I sort of preferred to let staff deal with it, but since it got kicked to us, I think the sign is really cool, so I'm looking forward to this.
All right, next item, 48, is downtown facade grants.
Good evening. As you're aware, the facade grant for downtown program has been around since about 2000. And each year annually, the city allocates $50,000 to that fund. Typically, we do 2 rounds of facade grants for the downtowns program. This year's kind of an anomaly in that we only did 1. And it's as far as the timing of this round, it's in what was typically the second round of applications. So first round is kind of prioritized a little differently than the second round, typically in a normal year. This year we received 4 applications for facade grants. The total requested of all 4 applications was $54,500. Each grant you can request up to $15,000 plus an additional $1,000 for design fees. Because we had over $50,000 requested, which is the annual allocation, we convened a scoring committee, which we have done a couple times in the past. Once we reviewed all of the applications and all of their submitted materials and scored them, we did go ahead and staff did go ahead and recommend approval of all 4 of those. To go through those quickly, 210 and 212 Main Street are next door neighbors. 210 is the frame shop. This is what it looks like today. And then this is the proposed look. So not much, if any, work to the second story, but you'll see that ground level facade changes quite a bit. And in the packet, the rest of their application materials did show some historic pictures of what that looked like. And that storefront, the doors and the windows match that pretty closely. 212 Main Street is London Underground. This is the existing storefront. And again, mostly ground floor work proposed. And this is what they're proposing to look like. Staff did note and wanted to point out that 210 and 212, although they're separate owners and they're separate applications and separate buildings, because of the structural work that needs to be done to the party wall and the masonry, that work does need to be done at the same time. So if we're going to approve, which we did recommend approval of both of them, it's the best for them that they're approved in the same year, those facade grants. Additionally, 300 Main Street was submitted an application. They received a facade grant for the Kellogg side in 16-17, and they did the windows and opened some up to their original side and did some replacement. This request is for the ground floor storefront windows to remove the awnings. Underneath the awnings is wood panels. They're going to take those wood panels out and replace those with the windows. And again, change out those second story windows to be double hung to match the windows on what they did on the Kellogg side. And then the final application that we did receive was for Gilger Designs, second floor only. Typically, facade grants are for the ground floor only for commercial and, non-residential, non-exempt properties. They have not received a grant before for their ground floor work. Staff did recommend approval. We have the funds available. They're really just replacing the windows. The only significant change is, again, it's been closed off in this upper arch area of the windows, and they're just going to open that up with windows. So with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
So do we have $50,000 in the budget for this? And because it was over that, I guess I'm a little confused about where the extra money comes from.
If all of the $50,000 is not used in the previous year, it rolls over. And we did have a little bit of money roll over from last year. So we had $59,000, a little over $59,000 available. So, and the total request includes a 500 because Gilger is not requesting the full 1,000 for design fees. They're only requesting 500 as for their design fees.
And really, just to be clear, the Gilger amount is capped at the 7,000. They didn't give us a very good range on the costs. And regardless, because of the replacement window project, essentially what it is, it's really not going to be a high value project. So we're recommending that's a hard cap regardless of the project cost.
Okay.
We do want to clarify the 59,000. We did have to go back and look at the program budgets. We do have rollover from different years. We did realize after we printed the council action form on Friday that there's actually $16,000 additionally in the program. So there's really 75,000. Kurt Friedrich didn't take a grant 2 years ago and returned that to us. So that was 16,000 on top of what had not been committed previously. So at this point, before your action tonight, we have about 75,000 in the program. July 1st, another 50 rolls into it.
And this and the campus town programs are separate.
They're separately funded.
Is there anything that we're doing with the windows on 236 Main that would create a precedent that we would have to consider in the future? I'm always very sensitive on these facade grants about making sure that we're not inadvertently creating a precedent that someone will later on say, well, you gave it to them for that project.
I think you are. From our records, we did not find a proposal that was this narrow and had been approved previously, that there wasn't some tie back to a first level approval at some point in the past. And really, the other part that's interesting is maintenance or just replacement of windows is not an eligible project. It's the fact that they were partially filled in, so that's removing a non-compliant element. That's the reason they can even apply for the grant in the first place. Now, typically that's been first floor elements tied to second floor improvements at the same time. So it's moving closer to funding. It is funding something that hasn't been funded before.
And so is there anything they could do in the future on the first floor design-wise that would then make that second floor window work eligible?
I didn't pull the historic facade, photos of what this looked like historically, since they weren't asking for ground floor work. They have done ground floor work in the past, but without a facade grant. So I don't know what their interest is in changing anything. I would assume the windows maybe were differently, just given the appearances of the building, adjacent buildings and all other buildings along Main Street.
So I would like to find a way to say yes to that, but I am cautious about the implications for similarly situated businesses that we're now inadvertently, because of our goodwill, opening the door to. And if there was a way in which we could give them some direction on the first floor to create a path forward, that's why we have the money. And if we want to utilize this, I want to see the money used for downtown. So is there, okay, I know I have you sort of on the fly here, but is there anything that you can think of that would allow them to move forward to that in the future?
Maybe you could say if qualifying work on the ground floor had been done in the past. I mean, it's kind of a bummer that they did ground floor work and didn't seek facade grant money for it when they did. And I don't know if it would have been eligible or not, maybe perhaps not. But here they renovated the ground floor. It cost them themselves. And now.
Is that the issue? And I appreciate Roman's question. Is it the fact that they made those improvements without the facade grant, or that there aren't design characteristics on the first floor that the second floor ties into? See my question?
Well, I don't think the program doesn't require architectural tie-in from top to bottom, because it's a very specific program about a storefront look on the bottom, and then the upper floors we expect to be historic if it's still an historic building. So they aren't necessarily the same thing on the top and the bottom. If you're saying, we didn't look at this facade to try and dissect when it was done, whether it would meet the program, would have been competitively funded at some point in the past. We didn't look at that, so I can't really answer that.
Okay.
But you recommend funding it anyway. I mean, despite
I
knowing
think,
that.
I
it's
think the
in-
only reason it's recommended being funded is that you have the funds. By the recommendation of the scoring committee, if there had been another grant request, we would not have recommended funding it. It would not have been competitive. It didn't score out high on the matrix of evaluation.
So in future years, a similar business coming and asking a similar thing, they still have to compete with everyone else who's asking. So that's okay. I mean, that in that sense, we're protected from everyone just coming and asking for this in a competitive year.
I would say it principally needs to be in a second round of funding. I would say you shouldn't look at something like this in a first round. That was not the intent. The first time through, we're trying to get the more impactful projects, encourage the larger projects like the 210 and 212 Main Street projects. And then if there's leftover funding, we can again appropriate that towards new projects that didn't apply previously, or to look at secondary elements or facades. That's how the program is meant to operate. So in this particular year, we didn't do two. So when we do a spring round, you kind of get stuck with looking at your allocations of funding, methodically going through, well, I want to first award these as the priority. What funding does that eat up? Well, we had enough funding after we went through all that and said, well, there's still 19,000 or whatever the number is, a large amount of money left. If you think of it as a secondary application at the end of this fiscal year, could it be funded? Yes, that's why we said it could be funded. But it's definitely should only be done in a second round in a spring after you've evaluated all the other projects competitively.
And that's where we are now.
That's what we're trying to say is where you are because we didn't do 2 rounds this year.
We did look back to previous facade grants that were awarded when second story was done, and they've all been in a combination, whether it was all one facade grant or 2 rounds, in a second round of a facade grant that's been associated with ground floor work.
But I think Tim still raises a good point. I mean, if we have a year where in the first round, all we get are applications to replace second story windows, what are we going to do?
I think that's why there's scoring criteria. I think typically we've recommended, since I've been here, I think there's been twice where we recommended don't fund something because competitively it wasn't visually significant and there was other competing interests. And then there was another time where we felt like the work really did nothing compliant with the program and had, again, visual significance of almost nothing. So there's twice that in my stay here, that's been a recommendation of us, but that's always at your discretion whether you fund something or not. And if you have the funds, do you move forward if they're not, regardless of its significance?
So I know what the hangup is for me. I think I can ask a question and we can move forward. Are these criteria mandatory such that we're sort of shackled into following the rules of them that we created, or are they only recommendations and it gives us some latitude?
They're both. So there's an adopted.
That's not helping me, Kelly.
They're both. There's an adopted program. You have to meet certain prerequisites. There's no bending on that. Now the scoring criteria is the part that are more like guidelines. So council created those after the program started because they had a number of applications each year that were over the amount available. So council wanted some kind of ruler to measure the significance of the proposal. So then scoring criteria were created to try and again, council adopted them. So it's setting up some level of emphasis for certain projects over another. They're not mandatory. They're guidelines to help council understand the value of what's proposed.
Okay, that's helpful because I'm going to treat them as guidelines and I'm going to be supportive of funding it. But I think we need to communicate that by doing this, we're not reconfiguring the program and that it's not necessarily a precedent for future applications.
I would remind council that I believe we have in the parking lot for planning and housing a discussion of a downtown improvement grant program that could replace the facade improvement grant program in the future.
For the backs of buildings and
Yeah,
potentially
and
things like that.
so this program as it is now may not be with us all that long.
Well, hopefully it isn't. Hopefully the facades all get fixed up and we get to move on to something else.
It'd be great to
But-
get out of that business because
Yeah.
you reached your goal. Yes.
Yeah.
And I would also say that I think we should also keep in mind what Jim Thompson just said. Our goal should be to create a vital downtown that has properties that are bringing in tax dollars for us. And so as long as this meets the baseline for this program as it stands now, it seems to me that we are enhancing this building in a way that is improving the value of the structure and therefore is to the benefit of the
But be
downtown.
real careful what you just said. That's not the criteria. It's not just,
Kelly told us it meets the baseline for applying for the
Prerequisites
grant.
to apply.
So
but I wanna
that's
be-
what I'm looking
I
at.
want to be careful. If we just adopt the criteria that is benefiting the building, then anything,
That's,
all
that's
kinds
not
of.
what I said, Tim. I said it met the baseline that we've established for this program, right, Kelly? It had to meet the bar because it's
The only
opening up
thing it's
those.
doing is replacing a non-compliant element,
Right.
which is the partially filled in window. If those were
That's the
filled in,
bar.
if those windows looked anywhere near what those that are proposed are, it would be determined maintenance and ineligible for any funding.
Right, but it
The
is,
hard line to follow here is what's maintenance and what's an incremental improvement to the facade. Those are the hard ones for us. When people have large glass storefronts, that meets the goals of the program, and we're saying, yeah, you want to replace them, that's maintenance, you're not eligible.
Mhm.
Because at some point you actually opened up the facade previously. Those are the hard ones to say yes or no to. Well, we say no because it's maintenance.
but this one is not that.
It's as close as you can be, but it has a non-compliant element. It,
So it has a non-compliant
It has a
element that they are
portion of
opening
non-compliant
up. Yes, yes. So
Anyway.
to me, that is the bar for this.
I take a motion.
So I would move approval of alternative one.
Do we need to take any public input on this, or can we just go to the vote?
Oh, that's
it's not a hearing.
Yeah.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. This one is a resolution. It's a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. Moving on to item 49, which is an annexation boundary determination for the Bergeson property.
So what city council is asked to do is to initiate the 100% voluntary annexation. As was discussed originally back in February, Mr. Bergeson represented that he believed he could put together a 100% voluntary annexation application in South Ames with a pre-annexation agreement. Council consented to have staff draft that agreement. It includes provisions to allow for reduced connection fees for water and sewer for those existing homes that are there. It does not address future development obligations. It does include our typical language about granting construction easements and any kind of access necessary for future improvements. It also includes language stating that we're not responsible for any rural water buyout that may occur in the future by an action of the property owner, either to develop or to change how they want to do things. So staff believes that the agreement represents the interests of the city, and it is beneficial to bring in all of these properties as 100% voluntary rather than try to pursue an 80-20 option. And we support moving ahead with the proposal. And the action is for council to direct that to be done and refer it to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their recommendation. So is there any questions on the area or the agreement? I'd be happy to respond.
Okay, if there are no questions, we'll actually do this in two motions. The first would be a resolution to accept the application and then a motion to refer to P and Z.
I move we accept the
Annexation application.
application.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. It's a roll call vote. Aye.
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 All right, the second motion would be to refer this to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
This was just a voice vote, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
This is very exciting. Good project.
All right, next item on the agenda is a staff report regarding campus town planning, plazas, and parking.
All right, good evening, council. We are reporting back at your request from a discussion back in December of 2018, you tasked us with 3 issues to seek public feedback. In no particular order, they were to discuss changing to the timing of parking meters. It was to consider input on how to locate and the size of a plaza, potentially at the intersection of Chamberlain and Welch, and then to also consider how could parking be added to the area in the future beyond thinking of the intermodal facility as additional parking. And so with the orientation of the request, the main purpose was to reach out to property owners and businesses in the area. That was the direction from December. So we sent out a direct mailing and invitation to both businesses and property owners to participate in a meeting at the end of March to look at examples of plaza configurations that we put together, kind of trying to illustrate how a closure of the street could work. We also put together a proposal about changes to timing of the parking and examples of how parking could be reconfigured on Stanton in the future. So with that, we got approximately 15 people to provide feedback and give us fill out a questionnaire, and we've included that in your council action form in response to all of these issues. After we did that, we decided that we wanted to do one other small pop-up event to try and see if users on the street had any different opinions. So Julie and some volunteers from the Iowa State Planning Club spent 2 hours on a Friday at Lot Y at Campus Town Square, seeing if people were interested. Apparently they weren't very interested in talking to Julie, but we had about another 15 participants, but most of them didn't fill out written comments the way the other users did because they were passing by. So that was our level of engagement to this point. And now what we're asking is for direction specifically to move ahead with changing the timing of the parking meters, direction on whether to proceed with planning for a plaza, and we'll get into that in a little more detail. And then thirdly, is there any direction about considering adding parking? And our main emphasis would be in the future along Stanton is what our recommendation is. So we're going to put up the plaza drawings first to kind of talk about what we showed to people as part of this process. Back in December, all we had provided to you was some dimensional choices. Is if you were to look at all that we had for land and didn't touch Chamberlain, we could just take out Lot Y as parking and put a very narrow rectangular plaza in. The other options that we talked about were, could we take on-street parking off of Chamberlain and kind of bump out the sidewalk and gain some space for a plaza? Or could we look at fully closing Chamberlain to allow for the whole area to be used as a plaza? And those dimensions varied pretty greatly from around 9,000 square feet to 16,000 square feet. And so this was the drawing that we had for you back in December, trying to show you that layer of change that could be done depending on what the priorities were. So for the workshop in May, we put together 2 drawings, and Julie will put them up. If you can put them both up at the same time. We didn't focus on the smaller option because it doesn't have as many impacts and details to work through. So we focused on the 2 street changing options. The one on the top is the full closure. We believe at this point in time that some passageway for a fire truck will be necessary as long as Station 2 is there. So we tried to illustrate that some space has to be left open, but what else could you do in that? So this is the first time we put a drawing out to show, well, what are possible usable areas. And then on the bottom drawing, which is a little, again, hard to read sometimes, the bottom drawing is trying to reflect an actual 2-way street being open all the time. So then you can see what the space is on the south side of the road. You end up with a usable space that could be programmed in a couple of different ways. And then you get a little bit more sidewalk and green space on the north, but more of streetscape treatment rather than plaza space. And you're wondering, why is it situated this way? When we look at the turning templates for the truck, we have to leave some of that towards the middle for the truck to actually make the turn and go through. We can't just push it all the way to the sidewalk as was drawn earlier. So there's a little bit of practicality here to get to both of these drawings. So this is the best that we can do in trying to represent a concept without any more work with actual details about the conditions of the property and getting into design issues. So with this, we were able to get feedback, again, as we communicated to you in the report. The general feeling was that if you were to proceed with the plaza, the larger option was preferred over the smaller options. There was not significant angst over closing the street. You did get some feedback about what is the utility of the plaza in general, how will it be maintained, who's really going to be there, is it really useful? Some of those kind of comments I think we've heard in different discussions over time. So that is the level of information that was provided about the plaza. So at this point, I would take any questions about the plaza concept and the feedback that we received, and then I'll move into parking if there's nothing to talk about on the plaza. And we'll come back to motions at the end.
Kelly, was there an effort to proactively reach out to either CAA or Iowa State on these proposals?
CAA helped with both outreach efforts. And then Iowa State, the CRP Club helped us gather. They were at both events as well. They were at the open house and the pop-up. And then they had talked about reaching out to the government student body. I don't know if they did or not.
So I'm gonna fine tune this a little bit. So did the CAA reach out to its members to try to also solicit feedback from them?
Yeah, so what we did in postcard mailing, like we would for in public notification and like we do for the facade grant. So we mailed all the property owners and all of the tenants. We sent them a mailing for the open house. And then CAA also, I don't know if they did everybody that's a member or how they did it, but I do know that they were calling and emailing people, reminding them to come, encouraging them to come.
So the CAA didn't actually formulate a position. Sometimes they'll send a letter.
Well, we got copied a letter that they supposedly had emailed you this week to the mayor and city council.
Should be attached, isn't it?
It is not attached. It was mostly directed to your next item about the 100 block of Welch.
Okay, I have that in front of me.
That's the only letter that we have.
Yeah.
So most of their response was about the Welch project on the next. So they participated in the past. I mean, they've been at all of our meetings.
Okay. And with Iowa State, the reason why this is a sensitive subject, we a number of years ago had a proposal to do something with respect to parking in Campus Town. We did not reach out to Iowa State administration. And then when we came to the vote, then we learned at the 11th hour that Iowa State had reservations about the project. And so the takeaway for me is, and I appreciate the fact that the student club was involved, but my question is, does the administration of Iowa State have any kind of input about a plaza here?
I did not reach out to anybody in administration at Iowa State.
I've probably mentioned that we've been looking at this as an issue for a year to my contact in the planning department, but what that means to administration is probably not the same thing as directly talking to a vice president. So
Okay,
no,
thanks.
we have not conversed with anybody at that level.
Okay.
The email you mentioned from CAA, who did that come from? I don't
It
know.
came from
Don't-
Karen Shitty, the CAA director.
this
She
week-
emailed us a copy of it on Thursday or Friday and it was addressed to mayor and city council.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. I see. Okay.
Is there?
Gotcha. It is in the back. Yeah. Good. Never mind.
But it's just on parking.
I see.
I don't have any further questions.
So for the parking timing, the impetus behind this was, if you remember, there's been a series of meetings about Campus Town over the last 12 months, 9 months. You had a workshop in July of last year, then you moved into discussions about the Welch 100 block reconstruction project. And then we also had discussions about the plaza and some of the other issues that are related. Well, one of the big concerns has obviously been the removal of parking on Welch Avenue. And what does that do to access for customers to Campus Town? And the planning division's opinion in December was that we need to consider this as a commercial district and think about parking more as a commercial support function than as just a general amenity for the area. And our recommendation was to look at adding short-term parking and removing 10-hour parking from the core of this area. So the proposal, this diagram showing you what's there now. Our recommendation, can you go back and point out lot X and Y? So lot X is that area in the middle of the block that's a public lot where you drive in off of Welch, but you exit to Hayward. That's lot X. And that is currently almost all, or I think it is, all 10-hour parking.
188 stop.
And then lot Y, where we've talked about the plaza, all of those spaces that are off-street are also 10-hour parking. And then the on-street parking that's yellow that you see is 4-hour. And the green is the 2-hour. So our recommendation was to take out the 10-hour parking and make that more customer oriented and put 2-hour parking in the center of that block. We also think that then changing the on-street parking on Chamberlain from 4-hour to 2-hour again, promotes that drop-in customer visit. And then the 10-hour in Lot Y changes to 4-hour parking. And we've tabulated the differences there if you're interested in what that means. Now, the other 10-hour parking in Lot Z and the other lots on the south end of Welch, we're saying those can stay as 10-hour to have some capacity for long-term parking. They're not in that core area. So we're saying keep everything else the same, just focus on the 2 blocks of Chamberlain, and then those Lot X and Lot Y for changes at this point in time.
Kelly, do the numbers that we've got include or exclude the 100 block of Welch?
They excluded. And that's, you can't read the note because it's so small, but there's 11 stalls. This bubble, there's a bubble around it, a blue bubble that says future loss of 11 stalls with a redesign.
I have a question here too. While we're zoomed in on that, we can see there's an ADA spot at the corner of Chamberlain and Welch. And have you given any thought to moving that to as close as you can get, given the closure of the parking spots on Welch?
I think that's...
So Public Works will address that when they reconstruct Welch.
Okay.
They're very well aware of it. I know Tracy's talked about it. I know Damien's well aware of that need in the area. They have specific parameters they have to work through. So we're not proposing changing that now. That'll be an element of the reconstruction project.
So it sounds like we're confident that that will get addressed properly somehow.
You will see that addressed with the reconstruction of Welch.
Okay, thank you.
And that, it's hard to see, but it is, the ADA stall it's a lighter blue. Here it looks darker, but just in case you're trying to count and see where others exist.
So is there any other question on the timing components? We'll move into the parking expansion drawings. So when we visited with you in December, we knew we were leaving lots on Welch. And then if you pursued a campus or a plaza project, upwards of 20 spaces could also be lost between Lot Y and the on-street parking of Chamberlain. So that was 30 spaces, almost 10% of the supply in the whole area with just those two actions. So council asked what are the opportunities to maybe add parking back. One of the discussions were what could we do for striping existing streets. We didn't go in and try to design every street. When we take a look at this on both the 200 block of Welch and the Chamberlain blocks, because of the driveway cuts, we just didn't feel there was really a net gain to pursue here, trying to figure out how to stripe all of these stalls and then reposition meters for maybe zero gain to maybe 1 or 2 across everything. So we're recommending keeping parallel parking where there's parallel parking today. If that's a concern in the future, we can always go back and look at that in greater detail. My biggest reservation in the 200 block is that with the come and go ownership on the east side, until that property is resolved with the number of driveway cuts it's really hard to make a decision about the use of the 200 block at this point in time. I feel like it could be futile in just 2 years or a short amount of time just to have made some significant change there and then have to go back and revisit it. So our recommendation is that, and you'll see this, that the pilot project that we did in the 100 and 200 block, the planters and the parklet functions with the benches and the bike racks, that's really come to an end. And we had made that decision as a city that when we reconstructed Welch, that was going to go away. With your next item and the update on that, the 200 block, we believe you should move ahead now and take those planters off the street and put the parallel parking back. That'll give you another 6 spaces back into the core of Campus Town. We think that's a valuable addition at this point in time with what's going on. And until there's some other decision about redevelopment, I think we should really just think of that block as parking that serves everything in the area. So other than that, as a striping change and reposting the parking meters, there's nothing else we're recommending to the existing facilities. So what we focused on in this drawing was if the plaza came in, what could be done to change parking in the area. So what Julie has on the left in option 1 is if Chamberlain closes, we could consider at that point adding angled parking. And there might be a couple of spaces that you gain. If that road closes, it might be beneficial to do that. We could also choose to do parallel on both sides if the way it is today, if that's what's desirable. But the big difference is if you look at Stanton, it's not as wide as the other streets are today in Chamberlain, or I mean in Campus Town. It has some carved out parallel parking on the west side that's kind of blocked out by our drawing. But if the city was to pursue adding parking, there is right of way to widen the road, and there is an ability then to either add parallel or angled spaces at that time. We can't stripe them in under the existing conditions. So what we're recommending is that at the time that there's a decision to move ahead with the plaza and those parking spaces are to go away, then that should be the impetus to look seriously at timing improvements to Stanton when the Stanton 100 block needs to be reconstructed. It's not in great shape now. It's not in your CIP to be rebuilt now, but it'd be worth as part of that project to decide then what could be done to add parking if that's still necessary or desirable at that point in time. It would be obviously be an increased cost because you would be having additional paving to do that, but it is a way to add potentially up to 20 parking spaces if you were to widen the street. So that could be kind of a no net loss to the plaza project. So those are our recommendations about pursuing future changes and then also looking at the 200 block right now. So what we're asking for motions tonight on are to direct staff to move ahead with the restriping of the 200 block back to parallel parking. Public Works can move ahead then with that project. We're also looking for direction to change the timing of the parking meters as we discussed in this report. If you support that, Public Works will then go out this summer and redo the parking meters before the school year starts, as we've recommended here. And then the third one, the plaza, is more in your hands of what to do next. This is the level of engagement we've done to date. If there's something else that you think we need to do to give you some more information, that's one option for you. Without more direction on what preferences are or going into design concepts, it's a little hard for me to imagine what else we can do for you because people generally want to know what is it, not theoretically what is it. And I think we've answered as much theory as we can, especially with these two drawings that we put up about how it would really kind of look and feel once you accommodate a road or a fire truck access route. So it's really back to council. You do have some funds set aside if you wanted to move ahead into conceptual design work to understand what it would actually look like, feel like, get some construction cost estimates that would inform your later decisions of whether to put it into the CIP and proceed with the project. But we have noted that there are a couple of things kind of floating out here that make it a little less certain about what you might choose. You have had discussions about the long-term future of Station 2. You have the 100 block Welch reconstruction project. There's some major discussion about those things that could influence future decisions as well. So maybe the timing isn't there at this moment to move ahead, and maybe you want to think about that later this year or some other time next year about what to do with that. So those are the three issues that are in front of you. Two of them we're looking for direction on, and the third with the plaza is really back to the council.
I have a question about parking space numbers, and that's the ADA accessible, or van accessible or ADA accessible spots. I was hoping we could add a few more, like maybe taking some more, or I'm on board with changing the 10-hour limit down to whatever you recommended, 4 or 2, but I'm wondering about in lot X, if we could maybe consider adding another spot, accessible spot there, and maybe even one of those first 2 on Chamberlain to the west of Welch. Yeah, like that.
So
because those are kind of, you're not on a hill at that point. And
so if that's part of a motion to recommend that, I can't speak for engineering about the practical design elements of that. There are some PROAG guidelines about it. I know they've talked about it, and that might be very well what they intend to do.
And I don't specifically care where they go. I mean, they don't have to go in those spaces, but that's just where I was brainstorming. They might go, but I would like us to dedicate a few more accessible spots, even more than we might be required to in the area.
So if you recommended that, then Public Works could look at what the actual design standards for it.
Okay.
It's not just place it where it is. It has to meet certain requirements for them to be.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, and where staff decide to put them would be all right, but I think just as a policy for council to decide we want to designate a few more of those in the area, I think. Do you want that in a motion, or do we want to take input
Yeah,
before any
we'll
motion.
take public input.
I'll wait then.
We do have a couple of cards for public input. So unless there are any other,
I have one more question.
you have a
Troy.
question?
So the data that you have for us has been primarily from the participants in the outreach effort. But we really don't have anything here in terms of utilization. So we really don't know, at least in the information we have here, how these parking spots are actually used. So we're making decisions about reconfiguring the length of time without really having even a beginning of a sense of what the unintended consequences will be. So it's easy for us to say, we're going to take a 10-hour and turn to a 4-hour. Well, someone's going to be impacted by that. And do we have any utilization data that would help us to think through what the results will be of our change?
So anytime that we give you utilization data from the meters, it's in aggregate. We have no way of knowing if someone stays for 75 minutes or for 6 hours in a 10-hour space. It's just the amount of revenue generated by that meter. So I can't give you utilization for turnover. That's not something we have data on. I think we very clearly understand that you're displacing 10-hour parking, and the only places they can go are to the other two more remote lots or to intermodal. And we know intermodal is underutilized in terms of its utilization throughout the year. So I think what staff is supporting is to see if that need gets met by intermodal. And if there's feedback again that that's not sufficient or there isn't enough space for long-term parking, then you could revisit that again. But I think we believe that's going to happen. And to us, that's intentional.
So to use the balloon analogy, we could squeeze the balloon here in these parking areas and displace parking to other areas. You feel like there's sufficient parking in other places where we really don't have to drill down and understand the utilization in the area. We can squeeze a balloon, it's displaced, and we're going to be okay.
I think because of the intermodal, yes. And I think the question is, if you don't have enough long-term parking, the first thing you would want to look at is, can you add more long-term parking to the intermodal facility rather than change the customer-oriented parking that's near the businesses?
Okay.
So that's kind of our thinking as staff is, we think we can survive with these changes. People will go to intermodal. If there's not enough, let's look at what the intermodal can support in addition and keep the short-term parking where the customers are going to be.
Okay, thank you.
And we also understand that there's still headroom at the intermodal, right? So that right now we have 40 spots or something like that. And if we needed more, then we have the capacity to add more without having to build another level, right?
Correct. So most of the parking is set aside as reserved, but the mix or the ratio of metered to reserved spaces can be reassigned at any time by discussion with the city manager and the operations for the budget for the garage.
Thank you.
It's not that the intermodal is underutilized, it's utilized very well, but it's utilized for long-term parking than short-term parking. And the impact will be the more hourly parking you put in there, it's not going to have the same return as far as revenue, but it can be done policy-wise. We work together with the university because by our contract, both the city and the university shared any cost of a deficit when when expenditures exceed revenues. So we've been fortunate the last couple of years, we've been able to, operating revenues exceeded expenditures, and we put that away for replacement funding. So if you're going to make a change on that, I need to know as soon as possible because they're already making plans. Actually, the budget's already been set for July 1st. So I have to get with the university administration and see if they're willing to change that now and how many spaces you want and things like that. Because you'll pull them out of reserve. And I hope they're not all reserved yet either. They could have already been locked up for the year. So I need to check. So you need to tell me how many spaces you want so I can move quickly to see if we can get them in this year.
I think it is also underutilized. I mean, they're renting out their, maybe permitted spaces.
That's what I meant.
I have never, as a time, an hourly user.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
It's being utilized for long-term.
Right.
But not for hourly.
But I mean, even the hourly spaces that currently exist there.
That's right.
Are never full.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where the balloon can go.
Right now without adding more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like.
That's easy. But if you want to add to it.
Right. Yeah.
Then you're going to be taking away from
the
long-term rental revenues.
Yeah.
So you're right, there is capacity now because it's underutilized for
For the hourly, yeah,
for
yeah.
the same
yeah.
number we have today without adding to them. Correct.
It's a-
If I could, as somebody who's worked at the Kingland building for the last 2 years, and knowing a lot of people who work in the campus town area, in my discussions with them, I think that the 10-hour parking is utilized a lot by the people who work in the area. And it then becomes to be practical. It then becomes like a weighing of, am I going to walk from the intermodal facility to the place I'm going to work? Or am I going to take a $5 ticket? And knowing many people who currently see the 10-hour spaces as too far of a walk already. And I mean, we're not going to weigh like that. It's kind of like a ridiculous thing to weigh in all this, but you really just lead more people to utilize the 2-hour spaces. From what I've understood is you get people to park long-term in 2-hour spaces, take a $5 charge, and they don't really want to walk from the intermodal facility. And I think that's something to take into consideration because we do want to consider this like a space for more of a consumer space where people are constantly cycling through. And if people are crowding those 2-hour spots and those 4-hour spots long term as workers, I think that you might have an inverse effect where you end up getting more congestion in those spaces. I'm not convinced that people would move to the intermodal. I'm sure some would, but I think that you create another issue. And to where that gets displaced, if you solve that by putting things on Stanton, there's a few things to take into consideration. I've known many people who have issues with Stanton as it is. One, as a pedestrian, and two, as somebody driving on it. The access point from Lincoln Way, and it's a really tight spot already to drive on. And then there are people who, as pedestrians, think there's not enough space already. And so if you're lowering the sidewalk space or expanding the street to accommodate the parking spaces, I think you end up creating an issue again where you're balancing, this is campus town, do we make it a pedestrian space or a vehicular space again? And you all just voted, I don't know, months ago on Welch Avenue reconstruction that is considering it more of a pedestrian space. And so I think when you weigh all those things, it muddles a little bit, and adding more spaces to Stanton would muddle the idea that campus town is a pedestrian space versus a space right now.
Devin, we're very capable of muddling.
Yeah.
We do.
Sorry if that was
No, those are
came
good
off wrong,
comments.
but
Those are very thoughtful.
That's just what I've gathered from my discussions with people who frequent the area.
Okay, I think we're ready for public input. Have a couple of cards here. Start with Mark. If you'd come up and introduce yourself, and we'll limit comments to 3 minutes, please.
I'm Mark Schrader. I live at 2309 Fillmore Avenue in Ames, and I'm currently the owner of University Barbers. I've been there 52 years, so I've seen a lot of things on Welch. This is by far the most disturbing thing that we've encountered is the no parking, as our new representative has pointed out. People don't want to walk. My barbershop is on Welch. It's down toward the south end. We do appreciate the plaza idea, but we have the most beautiful campus on earth right across the street, which is a wonderful park. The kids are using the hammocks, the trees, very much enjoying that area. We're trying to simulate the campus area with the campanile and the trees and the plaza. I'm not sure what the plaza is going to be used for. I noticed there's bars all around the plaza, and there's going to be people that have been drinking in that area. And I don't think that's going to be very family friendly. And if people are going to go sitting there and having people stumbling through there at night, I don't think that's going to be very friendly. I don't really see the purpose of the plaza. I would rather keep that as parking. You have most of your businesses are on Welch. The businesses you'll serve on Stanton are going to be the post office, bodybuilding place, and that's about it. If you do build the plaza, I would have a couple suggestions. There are dogs that are going to be walked through there. The students don't pick up the litter from the dogs. I would suggest putting some bags in the park for the litter. For example, there is a corner plaza there now. The wall was run into by a car backing out. It was left that way for 3 or 4 months. I walk right by there. I park in lot Z, and I walk right by there every day. And the firemen came over and moved blocks back where they belonged, just because they saw it and needed to have it done. So I'm afraid that there's going to be a problem with maintenance from the city. And there has been, the main use of that corner plaza is for a bus stop. And some people sit on the limestone blocks and have their lunch. It's not very user-friendly to sit on a limestone block. I've lost my employee of 29 years due to the lack of parking. She is very concerned about the parking, and she's moving to another location where there is free parking. And so I'm going to continue in my barber shop for another 3 years. I'll be 75 years old by then if I make it to that point. I have committed for a 2-year lease and another year after that as an option. And I'm glad that I can be there on Welch. I enjoy being on Welch. I want to be on Welch. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate anything you do for Campus Town. That would be an asset for Campus Town, but I don't think it's really necessary. And of course, I didn't think the parking removal was necessary either. But I'm going to stay there, and I'm going to support the city. I've been here for a long time.
Mark, we appreciate your input. Can I ask a follow-up question, Chris? Sure. So you've given us some good input on a number of issues, but could you speak to the issue of the change of what's being proposed in terms of the length of time on the meters?
I would like to say go for the 2-hour meters along Chamberlain. I think the 4 hours would probably be too long. Mayor Hala also pointed out that the come-and-go businesses like I am, where people come and stay for a half an hour and then they leave. We also have many restaurants along there that people come and go. So I think the 2-hour meters would be adequate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have one other card. We have Nancy. You'd also state your name and address.
Yeah,
please.
I'm Nancy Schrader, and I'm the co-owner of University Barbers. We're not ganging up. But, and I'm in favor of the timing of the meters to 2 hours. But I'm not in favor of the plaza because of the elimination of parking, and we've already lost parking. We submitted a petition not long ago of over 750 names of people that didn't want the parking removed. And those same people didn't want the parking removed from Chamberlain either. And that's a lot of names to just ignore. In Iowa, because of the snow and the ice, a plaza wouldn't be used very many months. And in the summertime, the majority of the students will be gone. Businesses, however, operate 12 months of a year. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that the police are against the plaza, and I could understand why, because it hasn't been that long ago that Visha was lost because of riots on Welch. Plan 2020, is that what it's called?
The comprehensive plan 2040.
2040, okay, I'm 20 years early. Stress the importance of economic growth. And I don't think the elimination of parking and the plaza will encourage economic growth. I would hope that the council's job would be to support businesses and not cause their demise. as the bookkeeper for our business, I'm very anxious about the success of our business. So I would urge you to rethink the plaza and to think about supporting the businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there anyone else that would like to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move on to direction from council.
So Chris, I would move that we direct staff to begin restriping of the 200 block of Welch as soon as possible. I don't know what their schedule's like.
Second.
And
All right.
remove the planters, right?
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, this one's a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
I would also move that we change the timing of the meters as recommended.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item?
I just want to respond to your thoughts about employees in the area and get just kind of my philosophy on that and parking. I definitely, I mean, I understand that we probably will see some folks maybe take a ticket probably rather than move their habits off to the intermodal or taking other modes of transportation to work maybe. But I'm hopeful that over time, the culture is already headed to a less personal automobile centric society. And it takes time. I understand that it's not going to happen overnight, but I think I'm hopeful that their patterns that they'll adapt and, use the intermodal or, take Ride to work maybe if they can't find a 10-hour spot, maybe in one of those center lots. So, but I appreciated your input on that topic. So.
To clarify, thank you for that. I like the idea of the plaza, and I hear a bunch of students very excited about it. Those were just things that I think would be good to consider because when talking about, there's a lot of things to balance. There's pedestrian, there's motorists, there's workers, and people who just want to shop, right? And we see it as a student space, and that's the idea that I've been getting from the council over the last few months. So, and really for a while now. And so I think that it's about weighing those different interests.
If Peter Rosen were here, he would remind us that students are half of our population, but we don't really invest much into Campus Town financially. And I think we should be moving forward with some kind of plaza. I think it's overdue.
All right, the motion on the table is to approve the recommended parking timing.
Changes.
Timing changes. All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
I would move that we direct staff to, I don't know how to phrase it, to add additional ADA spots within this area. I don't know that I set a number of them or places. I mean, I think staff could help with that, but at least 3 more than are there now in the radius on that map. I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful.
We can't promise that without talking to them. So I guess if you wanted to say
just more, I'll just say more.
Like Public Works to have a goal of finding 3 additional locations for ADA parking. That's probably the best that we can tell you.
Okay. Yeah, I moved
You're
that.
really saying the radius of the map, or do you mean?
Well, I mean,
You mean lot?
it depends on where Public Works can put that. I mean, again, there's
Just in Campus Town or
Yeah, I mean, yes, just because I think
Campus Town businesses?
So this is like, it's hard to see, but all of the parking shown on this map show all of the CSC Campus Town Service Centers zoning and the park on-street parking in this map. And then this one is just really zoomed into that commercial core area of Welch and Chamberlain.
I guess I kind of meant the commercial core area.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So, go ahead.
I would be a lot more comfortable just saying that we would like more and to be generous, but I don't I'm concerned that we don't really have the data to know that 3 is the
Yeah,
right
sure.
number or anything, you know?
Yep. I would modify my motion to say more, just
Second.
rather, and let staff come up with a recommendation on that. I'm comfortable with that.
So Mike, I think that's where I was going with your comment.
Yeah, I'm
I don't
sure.
understand what's the rationale? We had feedback that we have a lack of ADA parking.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, in the feedback we've gotten about the removal of parking on Welch, that spot at the top of the hill there was of particular concern to folks because it is one of the ADA spots for Welch. And so, yeah, so I guess I just want to be sensitive to that and make sure that we're accommodating.
Although I think we heard that that spot would probably be replaced somehow
moved, yeah.
automatically, I think.
Yeah, I guess in looking at the map, one thought that I have is really, without knowing what the requirements are, it would make sense to maybe try to have, could potentially make sense to have no more than one, or you wouldn't have to go further than a block for a handicap spot. You look along Lincoln Way, there's one along a 4-block stretch, and that's all retail along there. So maybe being a little bit more generous in the distribution of them across that core as well.
I would hazard another option if there's a lot of questions about this. I can't answer that tonight.
Sure.
If you want to make a referral to transportation or engineering to explain to you what has to go into this.
Well, that's what
sure.
happened. That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
that's
Look at
what
it, come back.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
Recommendation.
as easy as we're saying it.
a recommendation is
We know what
fine.
your gist of it is to try to
We're
increase
just
it.
trying to, yeah.
We'll see what's possible.
Yeah.
And I'll come back with the recommendation.
Any other comments, questions? All right, all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We're looking for at least one more
I
motion.
would move that we hold off on making decisions on the plaza until the future of the fire station becomes clearer, or at least until after the Welch Avenue project is completed.
I'll second.
The reason I'm making that motion is because I think that the fire station, depending what happens with that, it could be a building that could contribute to a plaza area, or it could be a building that gets sold and maybe what's put in there helps us determine what we want to do with the plaza. But it seems like a variable right now that we don't have the answer to. And I would rather not be making decisions about the design of the plaza without a little more surety on what's happening with Fire Station 2.
We could wait for a long time.
No, we're trying to get the answer. We've been working with the ISU administration on that issue. We haven't got an answer, but I mean, it's not going to take a year if that's really get an answer. I can't say it'll be the next month, but
So in terms of investment in the plaza, it's sort of open space. So we're not talking about building structures that would have to come down. It's planting some trees or shrubs or something.
But it could be, it could be really great if you use that property, or depending on what goes there, you'd want to plan a little differently. I mean, but imagine if, this is just brainstorming, but imagine if we could use that fire station building as part of the plaza property. It would really change the way we would design that property. I mean, I agree with you that I'm looking forward to investing in Campus Town, but I do think that a fire station is a vital piece, and we just want to do it right.
And it sounds like it's not going to be 5 years before we talk about it again. It's a year or less.
Right.
That seems reasonable.
right.
It does, and my thought about this was going to be that if we move forward on a plaza option right now without knowing the fire station, then I think we also need to be willing to scrape it off and redo it once the fire station is gone, because I think it really does change the context. If we're not willing to spend money on it twice, then maybe we should wait.
Right. If you get rid of the fire station, what's the need for the fire access
Right.
for a fire truck right
Right.
next and built into the plaza, you know?
I also, and I think it supports your motion, I generally had a concern about I think these are low numbers of feedback that we got on this most recent proposal. It sounds like a good outreach was attempted, but we just didn't have that many voices. And that kind of concerns me.
Well, and we did have such successful outreach on the Welch Avenue project using Welcome Fest and some of those other options that maybe this would also allow us to have further outreach on the plaza
So I think,
concept.
to come back to that, it's really hard to say to people, what do you think? There's nothing.
When there's
to
nothing to
react
give them.
I mean, plaza, yes or no, that's the question that we ask every time. And that's the feedback you've gotten. So first you task the Campus and Community Commission. That's where this even came from. So this is not for a lack of trying. There's been over 2 years of talking about, is something desirable? And we keep focusing it in, narrowing it in. We've gotten to a corner. We've talked about small versus large. I'm not sure what else there is to do right now for input. That's going to be really constructive. Generally, people say bigger is better, right? And then what's the timing of that is probably the question.
Well, that's what the motion is.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, 51, is the Campustown Public Improvements Project delay. Get a report from Public Works.
Tracy.
This one will be Tracy Warner.
Thank you very much. We have done a lot of outreach with the project. We started once the contract was approved with WHKS and company, and who's the design consultant. And unfortunately, we've only received about 50% response. Our goal is to continue with outreach. We've met with Campustown Action Association, who sent you the letter saying that they will help us to hopefully achieve this. Our goal with getting in contact with the businesses is the construction we know is going to be impactful. We want to gather information about their businesses, their operations, their delivery schedules, what are their needs, answer questions. If they have a basement, inspect the basement so that we know if we're going to potentially impact. Talk about this is an opportunity for them to upgrade their utility services as we're getting the new utilities in. So there's just a lot of information that we need, and so we need to hear from the businesses. So what we're recommending is that we do some water service transfers on Lincoln Way between Hayward and Welch this year, but then delay the work that's going to be on Welch Avenue until start of the 2020 year construction season. So if winter subsides early, we'll get it bid early enough that we can get in there. We've worked with Iowa State over the years on when to start projects, and it's easier to start them in the spring when students have been here, have been living here, and know where to go, versus if we kind of bleed into the fall, people are really new to the community and it's much harder to find their way around. It impacts them a bit more. So this would align with that as well. If we can go ahead and get it bid here, December timeframe, we should be able to get pretty good bids and then start as early as we can. So we would still very aggressively be contacting the businesses. It's not like we would relax a bit. We would continue to have this be a high priority project and work on it.
So Tracy, it's not clear to me whether our main concern is that everybody be aware of the project or that we have access to determine things like the hookups, et cetera, or are they of equal weight?
I'm more concerned with the information we need to obtain from the businesses. We can do a big marketing campaign it's been in the news. I think people know the project's coming. CAA has done a good job of that, as well. I think The bigger concern is getting the information that we need so that we can have a better chance for a successful project. That we want to make sure that they can still be in operation during the project. It's going to be impactful. It's construction.
Is this the sort of thing where more money spent on things like registered letters would make a difference? Or does that still not get the response? You just know who's received it?
Right. So our intent is to go out in person and catch them if we can. I don't know how to word that differently, but continue to attempt. We have a plan that would get several of us going out there and attempts to gather the information from them. And
we
then
know that the owners
we can
are
follow
on
up.
site?
What?
We know that the owners are actually on site. These aren't absentee owners.
Well, some of the information that we need is from the managers of the businesses that work with the deliveries, work with, their garbage and all of the services that they need. So some of it is landowner, but a lot of it's the operations. And we can consider the certified mail as well. I think people still like to receive mail.
Okay. Did you?
All right, we'll be looking for a motion to confirm the delay.
I would move we confirm the delay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Tracy.
Drainage improvements.
The next item is a hearing on Tea Garden drainage improvements. This is a hearing that was continued from April 23rd. We are looking to continue the hearing again to May 28th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to continue the hearing to May 28th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again. Item 53 is third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4385, amending Chapter 14 of the Ames Municipal Code to eliminate the investigative function of the Human Relations Commission.
Move on third.
Second.
This one's a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, next item is disposition of communications to council. We have 4 items.
One is just a staff memo.
Does that need a referral?
Item 3 is maybe the first one that
Requires
actually needs
action.
Right. Just a little background. Is the Campus Town SOD program, which we take our applications once a year, usually in February, with the hope that when they're approved, they can begin in the spring. In the past, we haven't had a lot of applications. I think Matthew's asking that we not wait until February to do another round. You can't take action on this, but I don't think you need a memo. You might need to give us direction at a future council meeting if you want to start another round early. He may know of someone, or it's himself, who wants to apply and doesn't want to wait a year or until February. So I don't know if you could direct us to do that tonight. If Mark says you can. It's not on the agenda necessarily, but
What, putting it on an agenda or directing another round?
another round. I'm not,
I think we have to put it on another agenda.
okay.
Yeah.
So you have to just, I wouldn't get a memo. I just stick it on another agenda to give direction to us.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple issue.
I would move we put this on a future agenda.
Second.
So are we interested enough to create a process where we're basically going to set aside the schedule for the facade grants and allow someone to say, look, I've got a project, I'd like to go ahead and open up another round? Is that something we have an interest in doing?
Well, I guess I would.
That's the
The
issue.
staff memo would tell us if that's unusual or abnormal,
We have to have
I
the staff of
will-
council action form with it if you put on the agenda. I'm just suggesting maybe you,
You're saying we shouldn't refer it if we have no intention of.
Yeah, I mean, let's.
oh, that's a different issue.
So by voting yes, you have at least
Right.
somewhat of a willingness to see this go forward. If you have concerns about the merits of this, then we shouldn't be going forward
That's
with
true.
this.
Mhm.
We're just adding work to ourselves.
You're right.
It's a call for a vote.
There's a motion.
There's a motion and a second.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adding it to a future agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Just to be 4-2, motion carries. We have one other letter from Civil Design Advantage.
I think it's a little complex issue. If you want to, I think we want to prepare a memo for you first to clarify the situation. Right, Gilly? Yeah. Memo,
We want
if you want us to.
to prepare a memo.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Does not appear that we do.
What, Kelly, you want to say something? Do you think it's worth them hearing about this before they say no?
It is an issue that comes up maybe once a year on different projects, so it's not a one-person issue. I'm not telling you what the change is going to be if you decide to move ahead, but it's not a one-person issue. It does come up. So what we do is we limit how many buildings can be on a property, so we trigger subdivision, and that can be complicating for certain types of projects. And that's what their request is about. Is there a way to not have to subdivide to allow for them to build an additional building on a property they already have?
Okay, with the new information, do we have a motion?
If this was an isolated deal, I would not favor moving it forward, but if it comes up as some repetition, I guess I'd be willing to see a memo. So I move that we ask staff to provide a memo in response to the letter of April 19th.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to request a memo from staff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Yeah, one sec.
All right, we're on to council comments. I have no idea where we left off last time, so we'll start with Gloria.
Bronwyn and Tashik and I are going to the International Town and Gown Association Conference this coming weekend, and it should be good. There is an Ames panel on the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that have been put in by the city, the university, and the Chamber of Commerce. So we have a 4-person panel for that, and Dan Culhane and I have been invited to participate in a keynote panel on race, equity, and leadership being sponsored by National League of Cities. So it should be a good conference. On more business-oriented topics, I have a number of things that I think we should be looking at for future council agendas. So I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to come back at a workshop in June with some options to enhance rental ordinances to address quality of life, life safety, and potential increased enforcement citywide.
A second.
So this is because we're left with, we don't know where we stand after the rental cap is removed. And in talking with Steve, he suggested that a workshop would be the best way to handle this.
All right. We have a motion and a second on adding a workshop in June to deal with quality of life issues in the rental ordinance. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll be doing that in June.
And I believe we got an email earlier today from the city attorney asking that we place on an agenda the repeal of the rental cap ordinance. Mark, do you have more specific guidance on that?
I'm going to stand this time. I always sit over there. Yeah, well, as you know, the Iowa legislature passed a law that prohibits cities from having a cap on rental permits for single-family homes and duplexes. The governor signed that on May 2nd. So our ordinance is now ineffective. We cannot enforce it. The legislation became effective just as soon as the governor signed it. So I would recommend that we proceed with repealing the rental cap that we have on the books. I don't like the idea of having ordinances that are void and unenforceable on the books because it creates confusion for the public. So just to clean up our code. And so I was just seeking direction from the council to direct us to start the process of preparing an ordinance to repeal the rental cap ordinance.
And can we give you that direction now, or do we have to do it as an agenda item in the future?
You can do that now because that's not actually taking an action. It's just directing staff to do something.
So I would move that we direct staff to work on the repeal of our rental cap ordinance.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of repealing the rental cap ordinance or directing staff to start the process?
Thank you for that clarification.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I'm done.
All right, David?
Good evening. I have a couple of things. First, we discussed earlier our policy for how we decide whether to waive parking meter fees or not. So I would move that we put on a agenda as soon as practicable this topic to discuss that policy.
Second.
And I'll support this. I would like to give staff a little bit of direction on this. Certainly, we're not the only city that has to think through this issue, and it would be helpful if staff could make even a cursory survey of what peer communities are doing with respect to this issue, so we're not reinventing wheels.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And one more item that we received a communication, I think it was on May 3rd, that has sort of fallen through the cracks. And this was an email from Kyle Poorman. I would move that we consider it in the disposition topics for our next meeting.
What was that? I mean, yeah,
I'll second.
It's not, it's
just
not
put it on the
listed.
list and then you decide.
Yep. Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second
Put it on the disposition.
to add it to the list of communications to council. Kyle Corman. Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
That's all for me. Thank you.
So, Tashik, can I get your help with my council comment? I have two, but you're the first one. I need your help.
Oh, no.
So, Tashik, if I wanted to ride my bike this Saturday, do you have any suggestions of where I might ride my bike?
Well, Tim, there's a mayor and council bike ride.
Tell us about it.
It's this Saturday. We're starting here from City Hall at 9 a.m. And we'll be riding from, we'll be heading on Pearl Avenue to Northwestern, and Northwestern to Brookside. And then we'll be taking Brookside all the way to North Dakota. Sorry, not Brookside, 13th Street, which leads to Ontario, all the way to North Dakota. And then from there, we're just going to be on some shared use paths and some trails, and we're going to go through Campus Town. Then we're going to come back here to City Hall. So it should be a fun bike ride if the weather permits.
Super. And so helmets are encouraged?
Say it again?
Helmets are encouraged?
Comments?
Helmets.
Helmets, yes. Safety first.
Safety first.
Yes.
What if the forecast I did check is a little bit rainy?
All right.
So how would someone know if this has been postponed? Is there a site, a city website that they would refer to?
Sure, I'm pretty sure Susan will put it on the website and send out a press release or.
Okay.
That is
Last year it was a little rainy. We still did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't much rainy. last year.
Yeah.
They're predicting thunderstorms.
Oh, I see.
So Tashik, thank you for your efforts to organize this. So hopefully we'll get a good turnout. The weather forecast will change. It'll be an awesome event.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
And my second council comment is I sent an email to council a couple months ago with respect to some properties on Lincoln Way in Campustown that are owned by Scott that have been allowed to fall into a state of disrepair that is, I think, approaching a health and safety issue. And I visited with Steve about this, and he thinks that the appropriate motion would be to refer this to the legal department for reviewing what options we have and bring those back to us. So I would move that we direct the legal department to review and prepare for us options as it pertains to the Randall properties on Lincoln Way in Campustown.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Nothing further. Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you, Tim. I get two tonight, but I'm not going to take either one. So, Bronwyn?
I got nothing.
Nothing from me.
I don't have anything substantive. I'll just say thank you all again for giving me the opportunity to represent the student voice. I really look forward to the next year. And I hope tonight I was able to bring some value to the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you again.
Yep, thank you, Devin. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Take one last motion.
Move we adjourn.
We're adjourned.